Tiwa Savage is set to perform at the Coronation, and I gave my thoughts on Arise News, the biggest news network in Nigeria. Take a look at what I had to say. Come on.
Nigerian musician Tiwa Savage is on the bill to perform at the coronation of the King Charles III this weekend. An interesting backdrop to Tiwa's invitation is the refusal of top British musicians like Adele, Ed Sheeran and Elton John to grace the coronation, which is set to cost over £100 million, with some speculating up to £250 million of UK taxpayers' money, according to Time magazine, and quote, neither Downing Street nor Buckingham Palace will confirm the exact cost of the coronation, though British media outlets have thrown the £100 million figure around as speculation, a sum roughly double the cost of Queen Elizabeth's coronation, and end of quote. Now, the New York Post insinuates that because the British royal family has faced a number of PR disasters in recent times, anyone performing at the show would have to consider whether there will be a backlash from appearing among their fans. Apparently, this event seems to have reinvigorated global focus on the viciously, racist legacy of slavery and the British royal family's part in it, albeit at an inopportune time. Kenim O is a media entrepreneur, filmmaker, and founder of OVG, and multimedia conglomerate. She joins us now to have a quick discussion. It's good to have you with us, Kenim. So, some are speculating that Nigerians shouldn't be in support of this, especially due to the colonial history. So how can you elaborate on this, you think?
Well, I would say that the impact of colonization in Nigeria is still present today, from predatory loans, from the West that are literally debt traps, even though ironically they would claim the Chinese loans are debt traps. But there's are conditioned to make us continue to be in this sort of colonial or need, right? So this idea of someone like, say, a Tiwa Savage performing when even British, like the A-list musicians in the UK are refusing, we have to look a little deeper. What is under that? To me, it shows that we're still in this mindset of colonial servitude. We're still sort of culturally clueless and ignorant, not all Nigerians, but obviously those that don't take the time to educate themselves on this matter. That's pretty much.
Well, no, thank you, Kenim. Now, on one hand, some might even say that Tiwa Savage is actually making a history because, she is the first Nigerian artist to receive an invitation to perform at a foreign royal coronation ceremony. And even if others like Adele might not be gracing this occasion, we do have the likes of, Paloma Faith. So the chances are that Tiwa will go ahead with this performance because she's looking to make history. Do you think she will face as much backlash as might be anticipated by some?
Well, I don't know that she will face the backlash because I think there's a general lack of awareness of the systems of white supremacy on the continent. In America, you see it in your face, but when you look into some of the colonial histories, the ways that it affects us, you wonder why an expat in Nigeria that does the same job, maybe even less work than you, gets paid 100 times more than you. Or, there are different things or hyperinflation in Nigeria. These are all systems set in place by the UK government during the colonial era that still proliferate today. So people don't really necessarily understand how this affects them. And so they think, you don't see white people walking around as much in Nigeria. So you don't know the effects the way that, you see it in America. But it's this sort of invisible war that we're fighting, and the ignorance is how it can continue to proliferate. Yeah.
All right. Now let's take a look at other issues. If we could expand this conversation beyond Tiwa's performance, what excites you the most about the historic coronation of King Charles III?
What excites me, I wouldn't use the word excited. I doubt that I'd be watching. I mean, watching him walk down, the aisle paraded in, blood diamonds that, our forefathers, bled for in at horrible mining conditions. This was happening on the continent. Um, so I wouldn't say I'm excited about it.
Okay, well, that's duly noted. Even though I'm sure there's quite a bit of excitement by some, but that might not, see from your perspective. But could you share with us, a little bit more about what you are into in terms of what you're working on at the moment?
I mean, yeah. So I just released an older documentary on my YouTube channel, the Kenim O Show, that talks about the history of white supremacy and its roots in capitalism. I actually visited Badagry slave port in Nigeria, and was able to uncover some interesting truths on that. So go check out at the Kenim O Show on YouTube. Outside of that, I'm also very much into Nigerian economic empowerment, and I have a new podcast called Business in Nigeria, where I'm interviewing entrepreneurs and getting the nitty gritty of how they've been able to make millions of dollars, billions in some cases, just so we can all sort of like learn how upward mobility in Nigeria.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, if we want to take this conversation back to, the coronation, it is history being made besides who will be performing and who will not be, in terms of the fact that the king is going to be crowned. How symbolic do you think this is, regardless of the scandal and the history of the royal family?
I don't think you can disregard that. That is how they, built their empire. So I would say the question is, why are we focused in Nigeria? Why are we focused on the British royal family's coronation? Why are we not focused on our own, like the Benin Obas and the Uni of Ifes? And, why are we not focused on our own royal family, and our own legacies and our histories? I think that's a real question. Pay attention to Black upward mobility, right, and Black economic empowerment, as opposed to always having to look to the West as though that is what to aspire to. I think there've been great examples in Asia, from the Middle East to China, where they don't glorify necessarily, or they learned how to build their empires their own ways. I think that's something that we need to be questioning, why we're so interested and so focused still on our colonial masters.
Well, there you go. She was really trying to get me to sort of like acknowledge his coronation, and because that's kind of the conditioning, especially in Nigeria. There's this sort of lack of awareness around that from a lot of people. And I just wasn't going to do that. So I'm going to read some comments. Some people responded. So I want to read this. Okay, so first person says, I love this lady's mindset. Hearts. Next person says, Tiwa Savage perform at Charles III's coronation. First, it shows she's a good professional. Secondly, the British government needs the Nigerian audience to watch so that the UK can boost its ego with Nigeria's huge population of about 217 million people. Tiwa, good luck, go, go, go. So that's the thing, and I'm going to break down why what he just said is very, very powerful. Okay. This other person says she's quite right. To put it in simple terms, if a person from your tribe kills your father and mother in your presence, take away your parents' property, later in future displays it as their throne, will you love that person? That is what colonization did. Tiwa's performance does not stop Africans from fighting against the disgusting imperialism. She is an artist and can choose where she wants to perform. I hope her performance elevates a positive attention towards the freedom of Nigerian tribes from Britain. Okay, we should focus on Uni of Ife that marries on every week. Okay, make Tiwa go, make us proud. I beg. Now, wow, you can never please people. So Tiwa is performing free. Abi, give me a break, I beg. The lady is pushing the ball too far, man. So that's the thing. A lot of Nigerians, a lot of these histories that I teach here, people are just very ignorant to it. So they don't, And especially like in America, you see racism in your face. In Nigeria, you don't see it in your face. So people are just so ignorant. They don't teach it in schools in the depths. Go read the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Go read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So people need to read these books to really understand. There's so many other books that you can read, but people are ignorant generally to this, so they don't understand. And that's how white supremacy continues to proliferate. I'm not going to read any of these dumb thing, but someone says, so Adele and Ed Sheeran refused to sing, and you, an African who these people directly affected, you're going to spread your legs for them. And that is the general sentiment. So here's the thing. Imagine willingly performing for colonizers and former slave owners. So this is where I actually responded to this comment because I wanted to educate. You mean she is performing for free? Then he responds, only if she knows what our ancestors went through. The British colonized and enslaved West Africa for hundreds of years. Oh gosh, I'm not gonna read this, but okay. The British colonized and enslaved West Africa for hundreds of years. The first British slave trader arrived in West Africa in the 1600th century, and by the 18th century, Britain was the largest slave trade nation in the world. It is estimated that over 12 million, it's actually 100, it's closer to 100 million, were enslaved and transported to the Americas during this period. According to the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, there's no accurate number, but some people are estimating around 100 million because they used to throw a lot of slaves off ship. Go watch my documentary. They would throw a lot of, because they were cheap, right? It was easy to get new slaves. So most of them got sick with the transportation conditions. A lot of them got sick by the time they got there. So they would waste their lives so easily, throw them off ship if they were sick, all sorts of things. The British abolished the slave trade in 1807, but slavery itself continued in British colonies until the 19th century. The last British slave colony in West Africa, Sierra Leone, can you imagine, gained its independence in 1961. The legacy of British colonialism and slavery in West Africa is still felt today. Many countries in the region are struggling to overcome the economic and social problems that were created by countries of exploitation. Then this person responds, if she was getting paid no foul. No way. Was my response removed? Damn. Looks like, but you know what? I have my response, so I'll read it. If she was getting paid no foul, bro, the ones that took our great-great-grannies into slavery and Africans that aided them are long gone. If Tiwa is getting effing paid like everyone else, I see no foul play here. This is the ongoing story of Africans in general are not respected. Exactly. Whether they go in today's world, coins before dignity. See what I'm saying? Well said. Okay. If you are invited officially to come to perform to be paid, that's no disrespect in my opinion. Okay, so these are these people's opinions. I'm going to read my response since for some reason I guess my response was deleted. So let me read what I thank God I have it down the way that I responded. But basically, there's a lot of ignorance, as you can see, and this is why it's so important to spread, knowledge about white supremacy and the systems of it. This is why it's so important to educate, because white supremacy's biggest tactic is to deny, deflect, and just act like it's invisible. Just as Tucker Carlson said that white supremacy is a hoax, this is a system that they believe, and the way that they start this is by first not educating people on Black history, even in, I mean, I talked about this in my last video, but they continue to just ensure that we're not educated about this so they can use it to exploit us. Okay, so here's my response. Okay, here's why her getting paid for it is actually the real problem. Background info to note, white supremacy was created because of capitalism and that needs to get, because of capitalism and that need to get free or cheap labor resources to build Western societies. Researchers so research the works of Ibram X. Kendi or my documentary on my YouTube channel, The Great Divide. Number 1, the West paid us for slaves in umbrellas, gin bottles, and poor quality goods. So based on your argument, as long as we are paid for the perceived value of goods of the day, that it's okay. But I'm sure you can see that the issue here. Just because the price seems right today doesn't mean it isn't, in fact, a trap. Number 2, while we focus on slavery and colonization today, we are distracted by the current system in place that perpetuate the underdevelopment of Africa. Western aid is a vicious debt trap, often with stipulations that prevent African countries from building factories and being self-sufficient. Why? Because the West earns more money from the surplus in selling us finished goods made with our resources. When African countries deny Western aid, their leaders are killed by coups and overthrown, and the West replaces them with right-wing personas. Please read the book series Confessions of an Economic Hitman, a man who formerly worked with Western bodies to design these debt traps, exposed his work in the system. So not only are our leaders complicit with their survival, not only are our leaders complicit for their survival, but they are also essentially bribed into being corrupt. By crippling our manufacturing capabilities and our potential for upward mobility, power, all sorts of things, it creates a surplus of funds in Western countries because it allows them to extract our natural resources at cheap rates, then sell us back products. Moreover, crippling our economies also forces us to default on loans, which gives them the opportunity to create new and more predatory terms on our loans. A, receive our natural resources at a cheaper rate. B, power over our voting rights at the UN. Number 3, the real issue is whether it was in slavery, colonization, or modern day Western aid. The system hasn't changed. They essentially use capitalism to bribe 1% of Africans, which inevitably puts the rest of us in perpetual poverty. We must break the cycle. Number 4, we be very careful of Western propaganda. Everybody watching, be very careful. They vilify countries that are sovereign from the white supremacist agenda, i.e. China, Russia, etc. Because at the end of the day, as much as Russians are white, if you go to Western Europe, you'll know that there's a hierarchy of whiteness, and Russian white is not the supreme white. That's not what Hitler was trying to go towards, right? When you look deeper, these countries are simply seeking upward mobility, and in China's case, it is creating upward mobility for other countries with the Belt and Road Initiative. This is a mass threat to Western purses for the aforementioned reasons. So in return, the West vilifies China. Number 5, King Charles pushes the diversity narrative, and this responds to the first person that says he's going to get eyeballs, right? King Charles pushes the diversity narrative, King Charles pushing the diversity narrative is another propaganda trap. They need our resources, and today they can't get it for umbrellas. Today, they have to get it for our attention, the most valuable asset in the 21st century, attention and the control of our minds. How do we improve? It starts by educating ourselves, as awareness is 99% of the solution. Some resources to take. Read the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. My documentary, The Great Divide, on this YouTube channel. Go check it out. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So that was my response. I hope this helps. That was my response. And, at the end of the day, Tiwa Savage is going to do what she wants to do. Nobody is saying she's forced to do whatever, but I went on, the biggest news network in Nigeria to give my take so that people can start really thinking thoroughly about these things. People should stop following blindly and stupidly and then further putting us in perpetual poverty. I made that statement about the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I want you guys to hear it from a researcher who essentially broke this down. So I have sources. So check this out, what he has to say.
That's likely a thought. The second thing is, I'm wearing the wrong trousers. I was fixing my bike, so I wore my old trousers, and so please don't video this part, because my wife will immediately divorce me. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do is just give you some charts and a couple of tables, just to paint a little bit of a picture that you already know. Okay, so what this presentation is fundamentally designed to say is this. Africa, historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about. What I want to show you is how these structures are operating. It's just 20 minutes, so we can't do very much. Is the economic structures. After colonization ended, we needed new structures to keep these countries where they were. Okay? And the first of those is aid. Okay? We give them aid. Aid for what? Actually, we give them aid to keep repressive regimes in power. That's all. Okay? We're not giving them aid for much more except a little bit of infrastructure to make sure those raw materials get to the ports and are gotten out of the ground. But for the most part, we give repressive regimes money and power and guns to keep that system going. This is what it's fundamentally about. All the hypocrisy about transparency and democracy and bullshit like that, it's all bullshit. You know? And at least the Chinese don't enter into that bullshit. They say, we don't care about the whole political environment, we just give the money. Okay? And it's for raw material extraction, period. Okay? Number two, and this was a very important one, still is debt. I was telling some of my students today, was it today or yesterday, about Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You remember this? Have any of you heard of this one? Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It's a book written by John Perkins, who used to work for a very nebulous, opaque bank. No one had ever heard of this bank, but it was formed in the 1950s by the IMF, the CIA, and the American State Department. And it had only one job: to lend money to developing countries that were raw material producers in order to indebt them. once you are in my debt, I control you. Okay? And this bank had 4,000 employees. But no one ever heard of this bank, you see. But it would go to country after country offering loans. And if the president did not accept the loan, they were killed. And he gives 2 examples of presidents who were killed when they did not accept the loan. You see, the lending is also very important to trap the country. It's very important. It's part of that process. I teach in Suriname. And Suriname in recent times had a huge foreign exchange reserve. So big they didn't need to borrow money. And then one of my students who was very high up in government, he said, you know, the IMF is trying to convince us to borrow money from foreigners. Why? I thought, duh, you know, sorry about this, but, you know, this is the game. And in the end, Suriname did borrow this money because the IMF said, if foreigners lend to you, then everyone will think Suriname is such a strong economy that foreigners are interested in lending to you. You understand? Before Lula came to power, you know, the previous president in Brazil, Cardoso, his predecessor, took a gigantic international loan. No necessity for taking the loan. Why? Because once I catch you with the debt strings, I hold you forever. You are my prisoner. Okay, so debt has been this huge spider's web which has trapped sub-Saharan Africa and keeps them held there. Aid, debt. We have a third structure which is again not known by many people, but it's something that was put in place and continues to this very day, with no one discussing it. No one says anything about it. It is monopoly buying structures. This is for all raw materials and basic agricultural goods produced by developing countries. There are only 4 or 5 Western multinationals that buy all those goods. And they collude between them. So if you take any major product, these Western multinationals, they collude between them. Even if we go down to banana production, we had a PhD done here at the ISS, and the person showed that the 4 or 5 major multinationals, they collude, and in order to make sure their control is total, what they do is they force all the producers to produce the same uniform banana. You know, the crap you buy in the West and has no taste at all. You go to any developing country, you know how a banana tastes, don't you? There's so many of them, lots of varieties, but we only market 1 or 2 types, so we have control, you see. If you don't produce at the price I want you to produce, I go to the next country. You see, we get control. So these buyers, they impose that control, and they keep pushing the prices down and down and down. Okay, this is the game. No one says anything about it. There are no commissions of inquiry to say, this is illegal, what you're doing. The WTO has nothing to say about this. But sorry to say, you know, if banana prices rose 10 times, especially for people like me who love bananas, okay, I protest. I like my living standards. Okay, it's the same with all the other raw materials.
Let me see.
This is garbage. And it doesn't hurt anyone to block anyone else getting on top of the ladder. You've read this book of how we have lots of examples in the WTO to really stop Africa industrializing. This is the crucial thing. We cannot allow them to produce manufacturers. It's not difficult. Trust me, it's not difficult. We need nationalist governments. We need them committed to industrialization, and it won't take them a decade to move out from where they are. This is the fundamental point. It's not difficult. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that. If we had time, I would go through all the different things that they're trying to put into place to block anyone else getting on top of the ladder. You've read this book of Hajun Chang, Kicking Away the Ladder. You see, when we become rich, we make sure the others can't climb up the ladder and join us. Okay? And this is what this next Doha round is about. It's to make sure, especially sub-Saharan African countries, do not escape. Since I have about 3 minutes left, I'm going to go to this economic.
Okay, definitely go watch the whole video. It's quite disturbing, disgusting, all the adjectives that you can think of that just repulse you. So this idea that the British royal family, and people will deflect, they'll say, well, that's America, that's not England, blah, 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 blah. In the last video that I made, I talked about how like white supremacy has prevailed. The microscope needs to remain on white supremacy because they collude, they work together. White supremacy has prevailed for the past 500 years, 150 years each, you know, or so. We have, you know, the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, then the American Empire. And after World War, the reason why America became a superpower was after World War II. And that was after Hiroshima, as Trump calls it, Hiroshima, Nagasaki in Japan with the nuclear or the atomic bomb. And basically what happened in World War II is that all the other countries in Europe had, you know, they were wrecked. They had destruction and they had a lot of repairing to do. But in America wasn't wrecked, and obviously we know what, you know, this other stuff America had done. But because of that, America then was already in a place to already continue manufacturing. America was working, and these other Europeans were not working. So at Bretton Woods, you know, where they decided that, they pegged the dollar to gold, but they also decided there that, you know, America is going to be the reserve currency for the world. But in that meeting was so important that conference was so important because America agreed to help develop Europe. So it was like this white supremacist agenda saying, look, we're going to ensure that white supremacy prevails no matter what. So as long as one of us is up, we're up. And so that's why you can see how the America and the UK, they have this like very close ties together. They look out for each other in the world. So even though the British Empire died, America still was, the UK was still successful, and they collude together. And you imagine, like, America was like just a few votes away from speaking German, which is crazy how things would have changed. But obviously the fact that they speak the same language, America was formerly a British colony, but they got their independence, and they've worked together in World War I and II. And so it was this idea that, okay, let's unite. And so that's really it. So when people try to sort of deflect, these white supremacist agents, when they try to deflect, you got to put the microscope back on white supremacy. That's the first thing. They will try and distract you by talking about slavery. They'll try and distract you by talking about the past. We have to put a microscope on what's happening today. Let's not, because that's the way that they can deflect and deny and, and then, dismiss. No, we must put the microscope on today. As the systems of white supremacy are proliferating today, the brutality is just as bad today as it was in slavery on the African continent. Absolutely, right? Look at Sudan right now, right? Look at the things that are encouraged, or, the oppression that happens, right? Okay, I won't say it's just as bad. These conversations about which is worse is just, it's not progressive, right? But I will say that it's horrific. I have the documentary about what they did to slaves, like piercing their lip, padlocking their mouths. The things that we even learned about slavery. We haven't even learned the surface. We haven't even learned anything. But there are things that are happening today in Africa that are vicious. And yes, Europe is definitely culpable. America, just read these books and you'll understand why. But they have this way of sort of like, my hands don't have the blood. I don't have blood in my hands, but you pay the agents to do the killings, right? Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Are you going to be watching the coronation? Are you going to be there? Are you going to be throwing an egg if you see him? Are you going to be throwing bananas? Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. You're watching the Kenim O Show, and I'm your host, Kenim O. See you next time. A peace.